Elias Verk's last thought before the pod jerked violently to the side was that maybe, just maybe, space had a sense of humor. One moment, he was adjusting the nav panel and humming an old Earth tune. The next, alarms shrieked as the ship pitched like a drunken comet, throwing him against the console with a graceless thud. He had been trained for zero gravity, for high-stakes maneuvers, for deep space emergencies. But apparently no one had included being flung headfirst into alien shrubbery that glows when it's offended in the manual. The impact rattled his teeth, shook the pod, and deposited him in a heap that might have resembled a human-shaped question mark if anyone had been around to notice. The first thing he noticed upon opening his eyes was the light. It wasn't sunlight, not exactly, but a soft, golden glow that refracted off every surface, bouncing between the oddly crystalline structures scattered across the landscape. He squinted, trying to reconcile the serenity of the scene with the throbbing pain in his shoulder, and that's when he felt it. The eyes, watching, hundreds of them, silent, curious, unblinking. Hello. His voice cracked on the first syllable, sounding small even to himself. He tried a joke. So, this is a planetside hospitality? No reaction, not a twitch, not even a polite chuckle, just those eyes. He made a mental note. Never do stand-up comedy on a first encounter with alien life. And then they stepped forward. They looked human enough, tall, slender, humanoid, but with ears that arched upward, elegant and sensitive, twitching with every tiny sound he made. Their skin shimmered slightly, catching the ambient glow, as if they'd been dusted with starlight. The tallest among them regarded him with an expression that combined curiosity, caution, and what might have been mild amusement. Elias, not wanting to start off on the wrong foot, or in this case 1,000 alien toes, attempted humor. You all come here often. He winced at the groan-worthy pun, fully expecting silence. Instead, one of the shorter women snorted, quickly covering her mouth, while the tall one tilted her head like a cat considering a particularly odd toy. Progress, he told himself. Small progress. Before he could formulate a plan, they moved together in perfect synchrony, as if rehearsed 1,000 times in some silent ritual. Elias realized he was being surrounded, the alien equivalent of a polite escort, though he suspected the politeness might vanish if he sneezed. He tried to lighten the mood again. So do I get, like welcome drinks, or is that just a human thing? One of them tilted her head sharply, the long ears flicking, and for a moment he thought she might be laughing. Then she made a sound, a whistle, a click, a little musical note all at once. It's like applause, he guessed. Despite himself, Elias began to notice patterns. The way they moved, the way they communicated in clicks and whistles that rose and fell like a delicate song, the way their long ears twitched whenever someone spoke. They were studying him, calculating, observing, cataloging. But there was curiosity there, too, not just caution. One of the women, her name, he would soon learn, was Lysera, hovered closer than the others, her copper-colored eyes fixed on his every movement. She wasn't just inspecting. She was trying to understand him, and somehow that made Elias feel both important and absurdly ridiculous at the same time. He made another attempt at humor. You're very tall, he said, gesturing upward. Did anyone ever tell you that? Lysera raised an eyebrow, if an eyebrow could be raised so high it nearly brushed the top of her hairline, and let out a soft trill. Elias, heartened by the reaction, nodded as though he'd just passed some cosmic exam. Small victories, he reminded himself, were still victories. Their escort brought him to a vehicle, or what he assumed was a vehicle, constructed from a material that gleamed like liquid silver, yet appeared solid enough to support his weight. He was gently, almost ceremoniously, ushered inside, and the doors closed behind him with a soft hum. Inside, panels pulsed with colors that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. Elias tried to poke one with a finger, prompting a sequence of lights that made him jump back. Okay, I get it. Don't touch. Noted, he said aloud, earning a soft, musical trill that sounded suspiciously like laughter. During the ride, he attempted to ask questions. So, you've never seen a man before, right? Lysera made a subtle gesture when he couldn't decode, followed by a soft click. He decided it was a yes. Good. That's probably not terrifying. He tried to sound casual. I'm not contagious, mostly. Another trill, closer this time, almost approving, he decided. As the crystalline city rose in the distance, sunlight, or something like sunlight, sparkling across spires that seemed to defy conventional geometry, Elias realized he was in over his head. He had crashed on a planet with an entirely female civilization that had never encountered men, and yet somehow humor seemed to be his only lifeline. Each attempt at levity, awkward jokes about gravity, quips about interstellar travel, puns about their glowing vegetation, was a tiny act of rebellion against fear. Lysera seemed particularly amused by his lack of spatial grace. Every time he tripped or misjudged a step, her long ears twitched in rhythmic delight, as if the universe itself were agreeing that he was ridiculous and therefore, surprisingly, endearing. By the time the vehicle came to a gentle stop at the edge of the city, Elias had made a silent promise to himself. If he survived this encounter, he would need to perfect his humor. Not just for himself, but for the sake of diplomacy, survival, and possibly the first interstellar comedy tour. Lysera leaned close, her copper eyes meeting his, and for the first time he felt like this alien world wasn't just a prison. It was a puzzle, and maybe, just maybe, one he could solve with wit, charm, and a carefully timed joke. The doors opened, revealing the city in all its crystalline glory, the twin suns reflecting across every surface, the alien women waiting with expressions of cautious curiosity, and the universe reminding him, in its own cruelly whimsical way, that being the only man on an isolated planet would require more than just skill. It would require humor, heart, and a willingness to look ridiculous while doing it. Elias woke to the soft hum of the city, a sound that seemed to seep through the walls like a living thing. The pod, now parked neatly in what appeared to be a docking bay, but was more like a ceremonial chamber, was empty of the women for the moment, leaving him with time to contemplate just how much he had underestimated the day. He stretched cautiously, mindful of the long, graceful ears peeking over the crystalline benches, peering at him as if he were some strange plant. Lysera appeared first, her copper eyes glinting with that same mischievous curiosity. She tilted her head, the long ears twitching, and made a soft clicking sound that Elias decided meant, "Get up, human. We have things to do." He followed her through corridors that seemed to bend and shimmer, surfaces reflecting light in angles that defied normal geometry. At every turn, Elias tried to maintain a semblance of dignity, which meant avoiding tripping over glowing panels, accidentally leaning on levitating objects, or commenting on everything in his usual sarcastic tone. Is it just me, or does this city make every hallway look like it was designed by someone with a caffeine addiction and a fondness for triangles? Lysera trilled softly, clearly amused. She even leaned close, the tips of her ears brushing his shoulder, and clicked again. Elias pretended to be intimidated, but he thought maybe she had just found his clumsy humor entertaining. Their first stop was the market, a place teeming with beings whose long ears flicked and twisted in rhythms Elias couldn't begin to decipher. The shelves held objects that hovered, shimmered, or occasionally changed color as they sensed him approaching. Lysera handed him something that looked like a fruit glowing faintly blue. He sniffed it and immediately sneezed. She trilled a note that was suspiciously like laughter, and Elias waved apologetically. "Earth has the worst allergies," he muttered. "I swear it's genetic." Despite his constant jokes and awkward gestures, he began to notice patterns. Certain gestures commanded attention, specific tonal clicks indicated warning, and a series of rapid trills seemed to indicate amusement or mockery. Lysera became his interpreter, sometimes translating directly, sometimes improvising, often in ways that made Elias doubt both his sanity and his dignity. He discovered that humor, his clumsy, sarcastic, self-deprecating humor, was perhaps the only language that could bridge their worlds, which was both comforting and terrifying. Every misstep, every awkward comment became a tiny act of diplomacy, a way to survive without inciting panic. In the garden, a place suspended over pools of liquid that reflected the twin suns in distorted mosaics, Lysera began teaching him about the society he had stumbled into. "No men have ever visited here," she explained, making soft clicks that Elias tried desperately to imitate, which made her long ears twitch in either delight or pity. "They think we are dangerous, that we are different. You are different." Elias raised an eyebrow. "Am I supposed to take that as a compliment?" She trilled in response, which he interpreted as yes, but also maybe don't eat the plants, they bite. He nodded solemnly, pretending he had been warned about something far more sinister than the chomp of a garden shrub. Politics, he quickly realized, were a labyrinth. Factions of women whispered in corners, casting sharp glances at him, some appraising him with thinly veiled suspicion, others with awe that made him feel like an interstellar celebrity. One particularly stern figure, who Elias later learned was a council member, muttered something in rapid clicks and gestures that made him wish for subtitles. Lysera leaned close and whispered in her melodic translation, They debate whether to study you or exile you, or both. Elias nodded gravely. Sounds like a Tuesday back on Earth, but with more glitter. She clicked in amusement. Their interactions were punctuated by absurd challenges. Elias was asked to demonstrate human strength by lifting objects that floated until someone touched them, to navigate obstacle courses that made him feel like he had enrolled in the galaxy's weirdest gym, and to respond to questions about human culture that made him wonder if he had accidentally signed up for an alien game show. He answered as best he could, sprinkling jokes liberally, remarking that his species sometimes communicates with interpretive dance, which earned a soft trill from Lysera and a few suspicious glances from the council members. At one point, he tripped over a levitating fruit, sending it skittering across the chamber. "Gravity is overrated anyway," he muttered, earning a muted laugh from Lysera, who made her ears dance in what he hoped was approval. Despite the comedy of errors, he began to see cracks in the alien society's rigidity. Lysera questioned rules and rituals, not openly, but in subtle ways that made Elias feel like he had stumbled upon a secret. They shared small moments of connection, comparing jokes, mimicking each other's gestures, and laughing quietly when the council's attempts at serious deliberation became absurdly tense. Elias discovered that humor was not just a survival tactic. It was a bridge, a way to explore identity and trust without provoking fear. By the end of the day, he realized that despite the danger of being the first man in a world of women who had never known men, he had carved out a fragile space for himself. Humor, curiosity, and willingness to appear ridiculous were keeping him alive. And somehow, Lysera's long ears twitching at every misstep had become a symbol of fragile trust. For the first time since the crash, he felt like more than a captive. He felt like a participant in a game whose rules he didn't fully understand, but whose challenges, with laughter as his weapon, might just be survivable. And when the twin moons rose, casting soft, elongated shadows across the crystalline city, Elias couldn't help but whisper to himself, "Okay, universe, I'll play your game if I can keep the jokes coming." Lysera, from somewhere nearby, clicked in a tone that sounded suspiciously like agreement, and Elias realized that maybe, just maybe, this alien world could be navigated with humor, courage, and a little awkward charm. Elias had grown accustomed to the soft, constant hum of the crystalline city, the way the light bent and shimmered, and the subtle symphony of clicks and trills that now punctuated every interaction. He had learned the language of gestures, the rhythm of humor, and the delicate art of being both human and diplomat in a society that had never seen men. Lysera had become more than a guide. She was a partner in mischief, a voice of reason when council debates veered into chaos, and the only person whose laughter he truly valued. Her long ears twitched whenever he cracked a joke, which meant he could measure her mood with an accuracy that would have amazed any Earth psychologist or any alien council member. The day began with an assembly in the central spire, a hall that glowed like liquid sunlight. The council had gathered to determine Elias' fate, and the tension in the air was thick enough to weigh down gravity itself. Factions whispered at each other with sharp clicks and hurried gestures, eyes darting to him with curiosity, suspicion, or outright fascination. Elias, sensing the potential for disaster, or perhaps absurdity, decided the only weapon he had left was humor. "I promise," he began, raising both hands in mock surrender, "I come in peace. Mostly because if I don't, I think I'd get roasted worse than a comet in entry." A ripple of sound traveled through the hall, trills, clicks, and a few suppressed giggles. Lysera's ears twitched in approval, a subtle signal that he was, against all odds, making progress. A council member, tall and stern, rose and clicked rapidly, demanding that Elias be studied for the sake of science. Another argued for exile, claiming his presence was too disruptive. Elias tried to translate his own experience into terms they could understand. "I'm not here to destroy your society. In fact, I think we've already started something, like friendship diplomacy." Lysera leaned close, whispering clicks that translated loosely into convincing but also confusing. Elias shrugged. "Well, I'm used to being confusing. It's my superpower." Another trill of laughter echoed through the chamber. The debate reached a tipping point, and Elias realized he had to take more than jokes. He had to act. He proposed a demonstration. Not of strength, not of intellect, but of shared experience. He invited Lysera to join him in a small ceremony in the garden, a place where the twin moons reflected in the liquid pools, distorting their forms into playful silhouettes. He gestured for the council to watch as he mimicked their intricate gestures, stumbled through their dances, and even tried eating the glowing fruits correctly this time. Each misstep, each awkward movement, drew laughter, not mockery. Lysera's ears twitched rhythmically, matching the cadence of Elia's efforts, and for the first time the council seemed to see him not as a threat but as a bridge. After what felt like hours, but was likely only moments, the council began to shift. Fears were addressed with humor, suspicion softened with shared experience, and curiosity replaced distrust. One council member admitted that perhaps isolation had limited understanding, while another confessed that the humans' humor revealed traits they had never considered valuable: resilience, adaptability, and the ability to connect without force. Elias, exhausted but exhilarated, realized that he had not only survived, but influenced a society centuries in the making. Lysera guided him back through the corridors of the city, her laughter echoing softly as they passed. "You've done something remarkable," she said in clicks that Elias had come to understand as admiration. "You've changed us." He grinned. "And you've changed me too, Lysera. I came thinking I'd just survive. Now, I'm part of something bigger, something weirdly wonderful." She trilled softly, brushing the tip of her ear against his shoulder. Elias felt warmth he hadn't expected, the first human bond in a society unaccustomed to men. The final act was both absurd and symbolic. Elias helped organize a festival of sorts, celebrating the unity that had emerged. Holographic lights danced with their shadows. Laughter filled spaces that had known only cautious clicks before, and the twin moons watched silently overhead. The alien women, previously divided into factions, now mingled freely, curious and amused, sometimes mimicking Elias' clumsy gestures or trying to imitate his awkward humor. It was a testament to mutual understanding, growth, and the strange power of laughter. When it was time for departure, the pod was repaired, its systems humming in perfect alignment. Elias packed his few belongings, conscious that he was leaving behind more than just a planet. He was leaving a piece of himself, shaped and expanded by the alien world. Lysera accompanied him to the launch bay, her long ears flicking with emotion that transcended language. She made a series of trills and clicks, which Elias interpreted as, "Go, but remember us." He nodded, his usual humor softened by sincerity. "I'll try. But fair warning, I'll probably keep trying to teach humans and aliens to laugh at the same jokes." As the pod lifted off, the city shrinking beneath him, Elias looked back at the crystalline towers, the gardens, the women whose world he had unwittingly transformed. He realized he had come to understand something fundamental. Survival wasn't just about avoiding danger. It was about connection, empathy, and the courage to appear ridiculous in the face of the unknown. The universe had thrown him into chaos, but he had responded with humor, curiosity, and openness. And in return, he had reshaped both himself and an entire civilization. The stars stretched ahead, infinite and uncharted, but Elias felt a quiet confidence. He had crashed, been captured, and discovered a world that had never known him, yet he had found his place within it. Somewhere in the distance, Lysera's laughter, or something like it, echoed in his memory, and he knew that no matter where he traveled next, he would carry this lesson. That trust, connection, and even a poorly timed joke could change the course of worlds. Elias Verk, once just a lone astronaut, now returned to the void not only as a survivor, but as a bridge between species, a bearer of laughter, and a witness to the strange, wonderful power of being human in the midst of the alien.